the labeling that we do is a little bit problematic. Like, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative. We have to let go of all expectations, because the problem is very often we're like, well, I'm not a creative. Like who? Van Gogh? Do you think you're not Van Gogh? Because you're not Van Gogh. You're who you are, right? And so we have to let go of all the expectations around what we're doing, because so many times I work with designers, they show me a design and I'm like, this looks great. And they're like, I'm so frustrated. It doesn't look like the thing in my head. And I'm like, okay, well, there's a few things going on here. The thing in your head is an expectation that didn't get lived out, and that's okay. The thing that actually came out and got executed is beautiful. And so if you let go of those expectations and instead whatever ends up on the screen or on your drawing pad or with your paintbrush, if you kind of just look at it and go like, this is beautiful and this is in my style because it came from my hand, my muscle memory, then we start to accept who we actually are as an artist. And instead of thinking we need to be Monet or we need to be Rembrandt, right? And so it just releases us to be the artist that we actually already are.
Welcome to Unleash Thyself, a podcast where we journey into the depths of personal transformation, spirituality, and growth. I am your host, Konstantin Morun, and today we are joined by Carina Gardner, a remarkable figure who has navigated the journey from academic teaching to pioneering success in the design and creative business world. Carina, with a PhD in design from the University of Minnesota, started her career imparting knowledge and shaping futures before venturing into the expansive realm of creative entrepreneurship. She's a testament to the power of reinvention, having transitioned from a university professor to becoming the CEO of a brand that, in less than 3 years, blossomed into a multi-million-dollar business. Through her program Design Suite and the Make and Design podcast, Carina empowers hobbyists and struggling designers to forge profitable paths in the creative industry. Whether it's quilting, card making, or crafting, Carina's expertise lies in helping creators transform their passions into steady income by selling their work digitally. In today's episode, Carina will offer her insights on building a creative business from the ground up, the nuances of fabric design, and the advantages of online education over traditional university models. Before we start, I have a small favor to ask. Please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these transformative stories to light. And let's begin. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm here with none other than Carina Gardner. Carina, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. Welcome, welcome.
I am so excited to be here. And especially because Constantine, you were on my show as well. So this is fun
Yeah.
because this is like a follow-up conversation, and I'm excited to talk to your people.
Yes, exactly. And, I get to ask the questions this time. So the roles are slightly reversed. Thank you for having me on your show. We'll talk about that in a minute here as well. But I want to dive right into it. You're doing something that's super fascinating, and I would say not a whole lot of people have figured out a way to monetize, which is their passions, their joys through art. So
Yeah.
tell us a bit more. How did you finally come to the realization that the old path was not the path you wanted to be on, and you found your joy, you found your passion, you found your why, and now you're doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, I feel really lucky because I've been doing what I have wanted to do for the last 20 years. So when I was in school, my undergrad degree, ironically, is in marketing and business. And I thought I was going to get into the advertising world. I did a transition in my master's degree and did a degree in design, which is kind of a weird transition. Like, people don't usually do that. They go get another business degree, like an MBA, or they go. And what I found was I went to do the design degree in the hopes of becoming a great advertiser. And what happened was I found that I was obsessed with design. I liked illustrating, I liked drawing. I had always been creative. My mom is actually very creative. My mom is Chinese. My dad is white. And so most people don't realize that I have this Chinese mom. And my mom is absolutely brilliant. She is a beautiful watercolorer. She did acrylics growing up. And I just really didn't think that was something I could make money at, right? Like, I was just like, there's no way. But I was in an interesting time period where the introduction of all the Adobe software products were kind of coming out. Before that, there was a product called Quark that I had heard of designers using. And I just I just thought, you know what? Like, I'm actually pretty techie. Like, I think I can figure this out. And so I started that design degree and fell in love with illustrating, fell in love with layout, and really understanding why our eyes move the way they do, right? So it's really just about visual communication and understanding how that all works together. So that's kind of I taught at the University of Minnesota while I was working on my master's and my PhD. Loved it, and then actually took a break from teaching. Then decided it was time to design. I love designing. This last week, I don't know when this is coming out, but this last weekend, I dropped all my other things I'm supposed to be doing, and I worked on my newest fabric line for Riley Blake, and just that is where my happy heart really is designing, illustrating, doing the things that I really want to be doing. So, and then for the last, so I'm about 16 years into my design business at this point, and I always made money doing it. That was the other thing. Most people are like, how did you make money? I was just like, I designed a lot. I submitted and tried to get contracts. I freelanced at any get-go, and I treated the first 3 years like almost like an internship. I would do design work for anybody for anything for free. I would learn and get to know clients, and I happened to get into the digital scrapbooking and fabric, like surface pattern design industries, and I kind of found that by being in those industries, I was able to become an expert in them. And so that's where I am now. I'm a fabric designer for Riley Blake now. I was a creative director for a scrapbooking company called Cartabella. They actually built that company around me, which was really fun. And now I own a design program. And I did pretty well as a designer, better than most designers, just simply because of some of the methods I use. And I kept getting asked, like, how are you making so much money as a designer? Most people don't make a lot. And I was like, well, I was doing this and this and this. Finally got bogged down enough that I was like, fine, I'll teach it. I'm not taking any interns. And so we created a program 2.5 years ago called Design Suite. That is in essence, a master's degree program for people who want to become designers.
What a beautiful and inspiring story, Karina. And if I heard you correctly, you said your mother, she was a big influence in your life in terms of design.
Yeah, she's really creative, but she's Chinese. She came to America after she got married to my dad, probably at the age of, I want to say, 23. She's quite young. She's ethnically Chinese, but she's from Malaysia. Okay, so we're it's a little different that way. You know, people always ask me, like, what language is your mom speak? I was like, English. She never spoke Cantonese to me, so I'm always really sad about that. But she, even now to this day, takes watercolor classes. She sends a birthday card to every member of my family, and it's always a watercolor that she's scanned in and she's made. And she's really, really good. There is some beautiful portraits in my hallway of each of my children that she watercolored. So she's always really dug into her creativity. And I think that seeing her physically do those things was really helpful growing up. And she also wanted it for me. She paid for lots of art lessons when I was in middle school, like just to learn about artists. Like, I went to this person's house and they taught me about Van Gogh and Monet. And it's so funny because I never thought of myself as actually very artsy, even though she did these things for me. And even in college, clearly I chose a path that was more, I felt like was very much more stable, right? Business, marketing. It felt very like, okay, I can make money doing these things. And yet it all turned around once I started really digging into design and realized that design is learned, that people could learn to become designers. And even if I didn't feel like the most creative or the best artist, that I could contribute to the field.
Oh, I love that so much. Because that's something I've struggled with in the past few years when I had this revelation that I am in fact artistic. For me, I thought I wasn't artistic because I couldn't draw, I couldn't sing, I couldn't play a music instrument. I know you and I talked about this on your show, but it wasn't. It was more like a limiting belief, a box I put around myself because of how I grew up, environment I grew up in, not necessarily because I tried and I wasn't good at it. So I wonder what message you have for people like myself who are kind of on the precipice where now we realize, wait a second, there is an artistic side to ourselves. It wants to come out. For me, it's coming out with the podcast, with the content I create, but I do feel it could come out through painting and drawing. How can one tap into that? Is it just simply by picking up the brush or the pencil and going at it?
I do think that helps. I think there are two things. Okay. So I think the very first thing is that the things that we've been taught as young children or even as adults, they stick harder than we realize. Let me give you an example of this. I have a PhD in design. I taught graphic design. And yet, until about, I would say 8 years ago, would I have told you I was a pretty good illustrator? So there's at least 8 years there of owning a design business, running a design business that made multiple six figures, right? And having a PhD. And if you had said, "Hey, so are you an illustrator?" I've been like, "No, no, I'm not an illustrator. I'm a designer." Like I boxed myself in and I was like, "No, no, 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 I'm not an illustrator." Yet I illustrated all my fabric lines. I illustrated all my scrapbooking lines. And when I finally took that on, that label, and I was like, you know what, you are an illustrator, Karina, is when I started, I had another company, I actually still own it, called Mini Lou. We did all these great deals. We did these mini coloring books, tiny little coloring books, for like Nordstrom, and we had like 500 independent toy stores. We like I had to actually physically do all this hand drawing in it, and that was the day that I was like, it's kind of snapped in my head, and I was like, "Oh wait, Karina, you're illustrating all of these. I think you're an illustrator." But it took me 8 years to even believe that I was. So that's the first thing, is that I think that our the labeling that we do is a little bit problematic, right? Like, I'm not an artist, I'm not creative. The second thing is we have to let go of all expectations, because the problem is very often we're like, well, I'm not a creative. Like who? Van Gogh? Do you think you're not Van Gogh? Because you're not Van Gogh. You're who you are, right? And so we have to let go of all the expectations around what we're doing, because so many times I work with designers who are like, I'm so fresh. They show me a design and I'm like, this looks great. And they're like, I'm so frustrated. It doesn't look like the thing in my head. And I'm like, okay, well, there's a few things going on here. The thing in your head is an expectation that didn't get lived out, and that's okay. The thing that actually came out and got executed is beautiful. And so if you let go of those expectations and instead whatever ends up on the screen or on your drawing pad or with your paintbrush, if you kind of just look at it and go like, this is beautiful and this is in my style because it came from my hand, my muscle memory, then we start to accept who we actually are as an artist. And instead of thinking we need to be Monet or we need to be Rembrandt, right? And so it just releases us to be the artist that we actually already are.
I love this so much because you're absolutely right. We talk a lot about intentions and expectations here on the show, and I talk a lot about that. And you're absolutely right because at least I only look at my life because that's the one I know the best. That's pretty much what held me back in this area for the longest time. Expectations. It's like, well, I was doodling in class and I'm like, this doesn't look very good. It doesn't look like what the professionals do online or whatever. So I'm not going to bother. Right. And then there's the other part, like you said, the boxes that we put around ourselves, which are usually because of boxes that others put around us when we were younger. We learned that, internalized it, and then we carried on with that belief or the group of beliefs. So I love to hear what those two things you mentioned because they're so important. Is
Yeah.
there anything else you've seen that really works?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is growth mindset on this. If you believe you can grow, then you can do just about anything. And we know it's true. Actually, it's scientifically, like creative wise, it is true. And I'll tell you why. There's a reason we teach designers in a 4-year university program to become a designer. Were they a designer before they started design school? No, they probably could doodle. But along the way, we were able to teach them principles, artistic principles, mathematical principles for making artwork beautiful and good. And so, because we teach them those things, they can grow to become an artist, an illustrator, a designer, or any kind of creative thing. So, the problem is that we have been taught that some people are just born with innate skills, when for the most part, what we are learning, what we've figured out is that learned behavior is actually what gets us to the next level. And that happens through education, that happens through our own growth and mindset learning. And so, yeah, I mean, we teach design in a 4-year degree so you can become a designer. We teach art as in an art school so you can become a painter, right? It's growth. It's all growth.
Yeah, it is right. Practice and growth, absolutely, 100%. I love that. And let's say someone, like you said, someone already knows their gifts. They've been working on this a lot. And I know one of your favorite topics, if not the favorite topic, is to help designers create not just a beautiful outcome, but also a steady income from their art. What have you seen as the biggest struggles for people to get themselves out there to actually bring an income for their art or anything else in life that they do, really?
Yeah, it's so crazy, but you can give me 2 designers who actually have the same amount of design skills. Like, they can produce the same amount of artwork, the same quality of artwork, everything. The difference between the one who actually makes money and the one who doesn't is confidence. 100%. Every single time. The designer who is not confident, the thing that happens is they tend to stop their actions, right? Like, you talk about like the different things you have to do all the way from thought process down to action. And the problem is that when we aren't confident in what we do, we tend to not do the work we are meant to do. And so if I'm an artist and during the day I am painting stuff, but I'm like, after a while of doing it, I'm just like, you know what? I just don't think this is that pretty. And I just don't think anybody's going to buy this. What happens? I'm not as excited to do the work. I don't create as much artwork and I walk away from it. Whereas if I'm the artist who same level, who's painting and I'm like, gosh, this is really fun. I really like it. I think I'm doing an amazing job. I'm going to open up another canvas. I'm going to paint another thing. They execute more. They execute over and over again in a way that someone who's not confident won't.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, you and I talked about those thoughts that lead to emotions and feelings, and then to actions and the doing. And you gave such a beautiful example because a simple thought of not being good enough or not seeing yourself as good enough and whatever comes with that will lead to actions that will not get you the results you want.
Yeah. I
And I
mean,
love that. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, I just think the whole thing with finances, and we definitely in my program, we're all about making money. Okay. Like, we don't shy away from it because so many times artists think that they shouldn't be making money. It's a very interesting thing. Artists and designers, they feel like their art is so lovely, but they should just contribute it to the world. When we know for a fact that I'm actually have a brand new book coming out, or it's already come out, maybe on this podcast, called Make Art That Sells. And the thing that we know is the artists that are the most prolific, they had the best careers. They sold their art and they sold a lot of it. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Rembrandt, Norman Rockwell, Andy Warhol. We know Pablo Picasso, 50,000 paintings, by far way more than any other artist out there. And what we see is that they were not starving artists. Okay. They were making money with their art. And when you make money with your art, what happens, which is such a lovely thing, is you have time to make more art. So there's a cycle there. And so when we can get our minds around the whole idea that what we produce and what we create is good enough and it's worthy for someone else to purchase, then we actually create a cycle for ourselves that's really beautiful. A cycle where we make money, and we get to live the life we really want to live. Like, there's all that fulfillment. If you're an artist, fulfillment in actually creating art, and purpose in creating it as well.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. And what I was going to add there earlier as well, which ties into this big time, is in the second example you gave, the person that's more successful brings more money in. The way you set the stage up for how they thought about themselves and what they felt, it wasn't money first. I mean, I know some people can start with money first, but it's all about how you feel about yourself and the process you're doing. Are you loving the process? Are you finding the fulfillment? Are you finding the joy? Is it bringing you happiness to just be there and create the art, whatever it is that you're making? And art can show up in so many different forms. We're talking about painting here because it's your subject matter expertise, but it can be anything, right? It could be creating social media content, it could be podcasting, it could be any of those things. And I love what you said because this is so applicable across the board.
Yeah. And don't you think it really contributes to motivation, right? Because if you're not doing the thing that you really enjoy doing, right? I am talking about art. However, this applies to the social media posts. It applies to, I'm trying to think of other, like, I have a daughter who's a writer, like writing. Like, at some point, I mean, I've written a couple of books. Like, I'm like, oh man, I want to be done. Like, the motivation level is like, whoa, way down. So you have to really believe in the thing you're doing in order to execute it and finish it. Otherwise, we have problems, right? We don't finish the work we're doing. And that really ties in with the confidence piece too, right? Because if we feel like we can finish this thing and it's going to contribute to our overall happiness, we finish it. If we don't feel like strong enough that it was going to contribute to our happiness, that's where we leave unfinished projects. We don't finish the thing that we say we're going to finish.
Yes, yes, 100%. I love it. And since we're still on the topic of AI as well, I jumped ahead there on the topic of art and design. And now we're seeing artificial intelligence or AI come ahead. And because it got to study a lot of these famous people, like you said, but even more of the regular people that have done art, it can create a lot of magnificent content. How do you see AI and artists coming together to create even better outcomes, but at the same time not have AI take over the job of an artist?
Yeah, people are really worried about AI, especially for artists and designers. And I keep telling them to stop worrying about it. If you are good at what you do, you are not going to have to worry about AI. You just really aren't. And we actually just ran a series of challenges, AI versus Karina, AI versus my one of my coaches' name is Asia, where we pitted AI against one of us in a timely manner. So we like had a 10-minute or a 3-minute clock, and we were trying to see how quickly we could do it. And here's the thing, over and over again, the thing that we saw, and if anybody wants to watch those challenges, it's on youtube.com/Carina Gardner. Um, Over and over again, what we saw is that AI is unable to replace a designer. It is excellent for giving you ideas. It is excellent for getting you started. It is excellent for a lot of things. Like it will really open your mind to possibilities, but it itself is actually, and I do think it's going to get better. I think we're in a 3-year run here where it's just it's still kind of sticky. Like if you ask it for a Van Gogh type painting with this kind of logo, it's messy. It doesn't really work. You still actually need a designer to come in and clean it up, make it work for the way that you need it to work. On top of the fact that as a designer, I will tell you most of the artwork we're looking for is vector based. AI is still only producing pixel based. And that's really problematic because we can't do a lot of things with craft machines, cutting machines, graph machines. We can't do those things unless they're in vector based software. So we're still having, as designers, it's great there to learn, to grow from, to get ideas from, but we're really struggling. I wish it was actually further along, is what I'm going to tell you. I wish
Huh.
it were a little further along because it isn't doing for designers what everybody thinks it's doing, because you still have to have a designer in there fixing everything.
Yeah. So let me say, so how do you see this synergy? Let's say it's far enough along where you are like, yeah, you know what, they can do the vector designs, they can do anything I ask it. How do you see it augmenting your life as a designer without necessarily replacing you or replacing a big part of your income?
Yeah, faster. I think that's for designers right now. Think about all the hand drawing designers have to do to like get a logo exactly right, right? But if a piece of the logo, like say the bird piece of the logo was already created, then you could go in and you could add the typography, you could fix it up, you could make it good. I just actually, right before this call, got off. I was doing a logo for a friend. She's got like a TV show, and we're just trying to create something that worked for her particular industry. It's so interesting because I help a lot of designers, a lot of business owners with logos. And at the end of the day, even with AI being able to write in everything you want from it, the human touch piece where you're like, hey, listen, the reason this doesn't work quite as well is because that pointed A on the top, it feels a little more masculine. You still aren't getting that from AI. AI doesn't know how to like pick out this is going to be really feminine. This is going to be very masculine. Oh, this sitting at the top feels very, very heavy. We should layer it, put it towards the bottom, and put this thing on the side. There's still like all of these design principles so far that we're seeing, and I think it's going to develop a little bit better. But I still think you're going to have designers putting them together to make sure it works because I just haven't seen yet where it really can think the way a human's thinking about the way it's going to be used. So for example, this particular logo we needed to put it needs to be in a TV show like it has to be in the bottom right hand corner so you can always see it. And so because it's being used that way versus a logo for a scrapbooking company, we're never using it that way. It's always going in the front middle section of our catalog on scrapbooking. So it's being used in different ways and that means that the actual way it ends up being is very different. The typography is different, the layout is different, the way it's being used is different. And so far, and we'll have to see how AI comes along. I'd be very surprised if it could really fix that even in the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's a beautiful part you talked about there, especially the nuances and the human element to it.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of it speeds up things, it helps with ideation. Now, in my day-to-day job with Microsoft, AI is one area I specialize in. And that's what I'm seeing day in and day out. It's not about replacing people, it's about removing the mundane, removing, let's call it the boring stuff, the stuff that's keeping you away from being in your genius zone, in your zone of creation, and allowing you, or rather giving you more time to be in the zone a lot more. And that is priceless.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially because one of the things that is hard for, I think, I'm thinking about writers and artists is the blank screen, right? I think
Mhm.
starting with the blank stream is probably one of the hardest things that we have to deal with as a human race. But if you know that it's already started, if something's already like turned on the engine, like the key has been turned on, and you're like, oh, I can drive now, right? It's on and ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, ideation is a big element that I use artificial intelligence in my regular day-to-day life. Like ideas for my podcast episodes I do on my own, ideas for research, ideas for many different elements of life, even vacations, right? Be like, hey, you know what? I've been on these vacations. This is what I like to do. Can you give me some ideas of what I should explore next? And that's why I always like, I know we're talking about a fairly specific area, but think of it externally as well. How do you apply this to your life? Because some of you listening maybe into art, maybe designers, maybe not, maybe have inkling, maybe know someone. But this applies to so many aspects of your life. And a lot of the topics that we cover in this conversation, in this show, apply to pretty much every area of our life. Should we have that open mind and, like you said, growth mindset to be like, yeah, if this makes sense, I can apply to this and this and this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Oh, beautiful. I love that. I love them. Now, we talked about that passion, right? And you and I on your show talked about the follow your heart, the big sign I have here behind my back. Walk me through your thought process on your own following the heart, because you said you've been doing it for at least the last 20 years. Now, of course, you've been alive for maybe 5 extra more years than those 20 years, but what held you back initially from following your heart before you jumped in here?
Don't you think it is for me, and I'd be curious for your listeners as well. I think it's always money. I think it's financial. I think we tend to not follow our heart because someone has told us at some point that the thing that we are interested in doing will not make money.
Yes. Yes. or it wouldn't be safe for us, or even providing the career that we want. When I say safety, it's the safety of a good living, like you said, the money aspect. Like what does it bring to you? And I would agree with you 100%. That's what I've noticed as well, and that's why I went certain directions in my life as well.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
think don't you think it's partially status too? Like if you go get I mean, ironically, I have a PhD. It was a freaking accident. But like, I mean, it was an accident in that I had only planned on getting a master's degree. So I do think that there are two things. It's that financial piece and the status piece. You know, I think that we trust our parents and we trust our teachers, especially growing up, to
yes,
tell us what is right. And one of the things, I don't know how it was for you, but definitely in high school, I grew up in a small town in Tennessee. I had no idea what the possibilities were. And now this is, I mean, what, 24, I'm thinking 24 years ago when I was in high school. And I'm thinking about how like half the jobs I know of today didn't even exist 24 years ago, right? Like, I mean,
exactly.
social media manager that I mean, like I think about so I have a pretty large team, relatively large team for being an online business. And we like the things that we hire for is fascinating. Scheduler. Like we have a scheduler, full-time scheduler where all she does is schedule Pinterest, schedule YouTube, schedule podcast, schedule Planoly, schedule TikTok. Like we have someone who just schedules. Like that's insane, right? Like that's her job. We have a tech person, like my executive assistant is our tech person. She learns all the new tech before the rest of us so that we can make sure that we're all like on board, right?
Yes.
I mean, it is insane the things that we hire for these days because they didn't exist before. But even back then, I would say that your view, your limited view in high school, at least for me anyway, is to what your parents did, what you saw at school, and maybe some of the things that were in the community around you. So, in my small town, there was one really, really big company, and then I lived right next to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So there were a lot of military. So those are the only two things I really knew about. I was like, I don't even know what else there is to do with your life. And it isn't until you go to college and you start looking at degrees that you go, oh, okay, there's a lot of these things. But then it expands you a little bit. Then you get into the real world and you like go, oh, wait, there's a gazillion things I could be doing that you had no idea there was no degree for. And it's just from experience, right?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's exactly how I felt. And I know it's slightly different now. Some places are improving a lot more. But to me, it also feels that back in those years, high school and even a big part of university, it was more about following a specific agenda without being taught how to think, how to find for yourself what it is that you are passionate about and like go after it. Some people have been fortunate to have the right mentors, either in their professors or in their teachers or their parents, and then they were able to jump on it a bit earlier in life. Others were just following the safe path. And when I say the safe path, is a safe path that either, like you said, your parents envision for you because they want the best for you, your teachers, caretakers, professors.
Yeah, it is, and think about how we are today. Even I still see. So I have three kids. My oldest is 20, my middle is 16, and I have an 11-year-old. Okay, so we're kind of elementary school, high school, college. Like we're in all the phases right now, and I think it's very fascinating because I still see my peers of my age telling their kids to go to college and do X, Y, and Z. Like they're still advising them, right? Whereas my kids, because I've been able to follow my passion and I do exactly what I want every day. I mean, here's the crazy thing. Yes, I'm a fabric designer, but really I'm a quilter. Like, right? I'm sewing like my stuff from my fabric because that's really fun. Scrapbooking, I'm scrapbooking or I'm making stuff with my silhouette or die cut machine. So I'm like cutting and making and doing all these cool projects. My kids have seen me doing this now for 16 years, right? 20 years, whatever. And my kids, when they come to me and say, I want to do this, I'm like, awesome, do it. Just know you've got to do a lot of it so you can become really, really good. So dig all the way into that thing that you really want to do. And so that's our our take on it in our house. We don't care what you choose to do as long as you are loving it so much that you are going to put the time and effort into it to get right that 10,000 hours so you can become really, really good at it. Because that's really the key to the money piece. And if you're worried as a parent, I know I am, like, right? All parents, like, I'm worried that my kids aren't going to make money. I don't have to tell them to go be a doctor. Instead, what I really need to tell them to do is become really, really good at the thing you really want to do. And that will make it so that the money comes.
Yeah, that's an amazing piece of advice, right? And it's the empowerment that comes with it and the confidence you build in them that they can do the hard things should they want to. And you are there to support them, right? You don't have that battle where they say, I want to do this. And you're like, no, you got to go become a doctor. You got to go become an engineer, whatever the case might be. So, so powerful and so much needed in today's day and age.
Yeah, it's interesting. My kids were laughing because especially my oldest, she's an animator. And I said, you need to start a YouTube channel and you need to get going now. And she was like, you are literally the opposite of every parent at school, mom. All these kids are saying, I want to be YouTube stars. And the parents are like, no, you cannot do that. And I'm like, will you get on YouTube already and get that going, please? And it's just more about knowledge, right? Most parents don't realize they're still seeing traditional careers like being a lawyer or a doctor or a software engineer or a mechanical engineer, right? You start seeing these very solid things that we've had forever and ever. And so those who have not dug into the way things are now don't realize there's tons of money to be made. We make money off of our YouTube channel. We do not have a big following. We totally make money from it. And it's like once you realize that there are possibilities, not only digitally, but in ways that you didn't realize, then you know there are lots of ways to make money. It's just really digging into it and figuring it out.
I love that. And it goes back to a word we used earlier, expectations, which expectations in this case really means you have a set way of seeing the world and like, oh, these are the only ways you can really make money. And then you're pretty much closing yourself off to everything else that's available, all the opportunities, everything that come your way, and then you get stuck. And then you pass that down to your family and your circle. And again, it's not because you don't want the best for them, because I can imagine almost every single parent, if not every single parent, wants the best for their children. It's just what they know and what they've been able to be open themselves up to knowing.
Yeah. I think it's scary as a parent to send your kids down a route that is almost like entrepreneurship, right? You're kind of like, it's open, it's amazing, but also while there's lots of possibilities, there's also lots of possibilities to lose, right? Which, like, as parents, you're kind of always trying to shield your children from losing. It's a problem for sure. But with my kids in particular, I know I do it. Like, I'm trying to shield them from losing. But the one place that we don't shield them from is especially careers. Because if anyone can tell you that you can do something creative with your life, you can be drawing all day long. You can be making money from it. It is me. And I never expected that from my life. Not once.
Powerful. And I love that you touch on the losing piece and about shielding others from losing. And I was the same with myself and those around me, and everyone I knew in my life was the same. And it makes sense because obviously we have a loss aversion, we have a fear of loss. Like there's a lot of elements of being human that come with that. But what I've come to understand, and you mentioned growth mindset already a few times, loss is actually, or failing, if you want to call it that way, it's actually amazing because it teaches us so much. It's usually in my failures that I learn more than I do in everything else. And it, for me, I see two big categories. It either teaches you what you shouldn't be doing, or it teaches you how you can probably approach it better next time. At the very least, right? There's a lot more than that, but those are two big categories. And I'm like, if you're protecting someone for good reason and you're trying to prevent all those losses and failures and fallings down, then you really what you're doing is you're preventing them from actually learning from a really good source, a really good teacher.
Yeah. The thing about failure is so interesting because when you fail, you literally are forced to change. There's no other good reason to change. We don't, it's very hard, New Year's resolutions, people are trying to enforce change, but it's when we feel pain that we change. not when we feel necessarily pleasure. Maybe we will do more of the thing that we're doing when we feel pleasure. But like when we feel pain, we are forced to change because we no longer want to feel it. And it's so base, human, foundational to make changes. So when I fail at something, I immediately I'm like, whoop, time to go that way, right? So like I totally change all my actions and I make changes that are usually smarter. But I agree with you. It is problematic because we try to shield our children, shield the people around us. And in a lot of ways, I'll hear someone give advice to somebody else and I'll be listening in on that conversation and I'll be like, oh, that has more to do with the person giving advice and the person who's receiving the advice.
Yes, 100%, 100%. I mean, there's another concept I'm playing with more recently that entered my life. I've heard it in psychology and also, let's say, in the spiritual realm of the mirroring effect, which means like when I have an interaction with you, Karina, and I'm starting to try to control you or to see things in you that I don't like, it's usually a reflection of what I don't like about myself, what I want to control within me. Right. So then if I see you doing amazing things and I'm like, oh, I want to shield you, I want to protect you, I want to do all those things, that comes from a place where like, I wish I could have done those things. But because I'm doing all those things, to me, it feels very unsafe. It feels very hard to go that path. Right. So love that example.
Yeah. And super scary, right? Because then the other thing that could happen is the person who's doing new things, the person who is saying, don't do that, don't do that. They're doing it from a place of self-preservation, not usually because they want to hold you back, but because they are in their mindset a certain way. They're already thinking this way, and it's hard for them to break out of that. And so, yeah, I even hear this. I mean, the internet's a great place for this, right? People who comment on social media posts, people who say mean things. I mean, for us on our team, we're just like, oh, like we almost like we feel sad and sorry for this person because then we have to block them. But like more for them because we're like they're spending this is the way they're spending their energy. This is their time and energy. And you're like, man, if I sat all day long trying to write negative things about everybody else's stuff on the internet, how sad is my life that is the way I'm choosing to spend it?
100%. That's so beautiful. And yes, I agree with you 100%. Old me would be like, oh no, I need to get into this with them to show them they're wrong. And then new me is like you. It's like extend compassion, empathy, and be like, hopefully they'll come to realize their ways. And there's no need to put even more negative energy out there in the universe. There's plenty of it, and it
Yeah,
leads
there
to
is
nothing good.
there is plenty of negative energy. What we don't have enough of is positive energy, right? And so the more we put out there, the better it is. I think who is it that said, I don't even know who said it, but like bring your own weather with you. So when you walk into a room and you are positive, excited, happy, uplifting, what happens? People are drawn to that, right? They will usually try to up level that same mirroring effect to where you are. Whereas if you walk into the room and you're kind of down or even neutral, like super neutral, people will be more guarded with you because they're trying to figure out exactly where you're at. So it's not an easy thing for me, but I will say that one of the things that a few years ago I decided was I was like, I am the weather. And so if I bring the sunshine, people want to bask in that, right? If I bring the rainy clouds, people are going to be sad with me, right? That's that same mirroring effect.
Yes, and that's actually such a beautiful analogy. And it's funny enough, I was reading some research recently of how they actually discovered that all the hormones within us, let's say the stress hormone, cortisol, gets released into your body, right? And you actually start to sweat it out through your skin, right? It comes out through your pores. And it's not like it's just within you. It actually, I think they said 2 to 6 feet. So let's say you work in an office, you have a person next to you, they'll get the same residue from you, right? So it's not that they, like you said, they'll just see you're off. They'll get to physically feel it without realizing. And then, of course, there's the empaths and the people that can sense feelings. Like, for example, I can walk into a room and before anyone says anything, I can tell without even realizing how if someone is in a good mood or not, or if the energy is off somehow. And there's many people out there, many people that can do it even better than me or at another level. So like everything kind of points in the right direction now. It's like be the change you want to see, first of all, which is another beautiful quote from Gandhi. But also, what you said is like, be the weather you want to see in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, every single bit of that, right, is it rings true. And I would say, especially because it sounds like you have a lot of creatives here, maybe some people who are empaths, people who are, maybe have people in their lives surrounding them that maybe you guys like one negative comment, it takes seven positive comments to negate one negative comment. So even if you have someone in your life who's mostly positive, but a little tiny bit negative, it can kill you. It is just like dragging all the love and the joy out of your life. So do everything you can to be surrounded by positivity and like-minded people. That's actually in some ways that's why our program has worked the way it has. I started it to design, just teach design. And what we found is people stayed and wouldn't freaking leave. That was like the hard part. We're like, it's time for you to go. Like you're done with your year with us. Like it's time for you to move on. They're like, they don't want to leave. Why did they not want to leave? Because it's so delightful to be around other people, especially if you set a standard for your program and or the people you're around and you're like, this is where we're at. You must rise to this. This is where we talk. This is where we behave. And if there's gonna be any negativity, you will get kicked out. Like this is it's inappropriate for the way we do things.
Wow, I love that. And I was going to actually ask you about building, because you talk about this building a rewarding, a tight knit coaching community, and it sounds like that's pretty much what you're talking about here, right? And how you set up the scene, but also you lead by example. Because I would imagine you and your staff that has to take care of the community, you cannot be like, hey, there's no negativity yet. You may come in and throw one negative comment here and there.
Yeah. You know what is I think is interesting. I know you're about to start a coaching program as well. So I've been in several masterminds, and I just went in November. I went to Scottsdale to meet with one of the masterminds I'm in. And that particular mastermind, I'm starting to talk. It's the first time I'd ever been to an event. I start talking to some other members. We start chatting, and I was like, so how does this compare to another mastermind that this person was in? And she was like, it's so interesting. This is a little, what I would say, it's professional and maybe a little, more untouchable versus this other one I am is very warm and everybody's like hugging each other and it's just a different feeling. And I was like, isn't that interesting because they match the leaders of those two programs. So like the leader in the one that I'm in is a little bit more standoffish. Like he's not someone you'd like be like besties with. Like you learn so much. He's very professional. It's amazing. This other particular leader that I happen to know of as well, very warm, very kind, very like the person you would like he would be super excited to give you a hug. And I was just like, it's so interesting that leadership is almost everything in an organization because it trickles down to not only the team members but the community itself. And I will say this about my particular community. I didn't go into this to build a community. I got into this to teach design. I was like, I'm going to teach design. This is what I would do. I'm a professor. This is what I know how to do. And my members kept asking for stuff. I remember the first time they were like, Karina, can we have a Facebook group? And I was like, no, because I don't want to be in charge of a Facebook group. They're like, we want to talk to each other. I was like, fine, I'll make something for you guys. And so then I made this community. We do it directly in Kajabi, actually. And they all start chatting with each other and they all like each other. 6 months later, one of them comes to me we're just like virtual. And she goes, hey, Karina, we want to talk to each other. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, can we like meet virtually so we can talk to each other? And I was just like, seriously? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, fine. Okay. So then I set up meetings for them so they could all like hang out and talk to each other virtually. They loved it. Like it is a big piece of our program today. Then a year later, I did a live retreat. And 22 of them, we have a really big program at this point, but like only 22 of them came to this live retreat. And we use Marco Polo. I personally use Marco Polo a lot. It's a digital app where you can just video chat on your own timeline, but people can watch it at any time. And we loved it. And I introduced it to those 22 people because I said, like, let's just talk here about, we've got all these events going, but now you can talk to each other and all this stuff. They were all like, oh my gosh, we love this. Can we take this to the entire community? And I was just like, it's a lot of people. Like having 200 people on Marco Polo, I was just like, I don't even know if we can manage that. we have figured it out, but like it is now a seamless part of our program. People like to talk to each other. They like to get to know each other. They find out where each other lives and then they get together and go have lunch. Little groups are made. Like within our design program, we have a jewelry group and we have an SVG group, and they all built these themselves. I had nothing to do with it. But the bottom line is, by being a leader who's like, sure, I'll do whatever you like, they come to me and they say, I want this. And I go, okay, let's build it for you. And what it is seamless community building, because you're doing what your members actually want to do, how they want to communicate, how they want to be together. And every time something would happen and they got excited about it, we were just like, okay, I guess we'll do this for everybody, and it is a lot of work, but it's been 100% worth it because our members love being together and they get so much out of it.
Oh, so beautiful. There's so many things to take on there, but what comes up is, of course, you have an open mind, you have a growth mindset, you empower people left and right, and that's exactly what you're doing here. It's so beautiful to see. And the need to belong to a community, to be part of a community, is so strong in human beings from a physiological point of view and everything else, really spiritual and otherwise, that it doesn't surprise me that they would want that, especially because, I mean, I look at my life, the things that I'm passionate about now, I have very few people in my physical, let's say, surroundings that I can actually talk to and connect with on that level. And I would imagine the people in your courses with their art, it's very hard to have that in their lives. So they, well, online is the best next thing. And then, like you said, they can meet in person, they can do all these amazing things. So it's so beautiful to hear that, because it's truly an amazing thing to enable for a group of people.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? It is. I mean, talk about, yes, the pandemic was really tough. There were things that were not so great that came out of it, but there were also some really good things. And I don't think we talk about that enough. Zoom came out of it. People got accustomed to being virtual. And I don't, before that, especially as a previous university professor, I used to think there is no way to teach this except for my 20 students in my classroom with me, right? And I had a real mindset shift about what I could do virtually with people. And suddenly people in Australia, people in Great Britain, people in Canada, and I'm in the United States, I'm in Utah, like suddenly all of these areas were coming into our program because they didn't have what we had here virtually. Like I was like,
Exactly.
okay, we get to bring you an academic program plus a business program plus a community. It really did change the way I thought about bringing people together.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I like to touch on the negatives and the positives of any one event, of course. There's so much negativity around COVID for good reason. But like you said, people forget in general, and I did too, to look at some of the positives. It's like, and then which one do you want to focus on, right? Because you can stand, many people are stuck in that, well, this was so bad. Then you don't get to see the beauty in all the other stuff that happened around you during the time. Beautiful, Karina. Well, it's been such a beautiful conversation. I could honestly talk with you for hours and hours here. But in the interest of time, and before, of course, before I let you go, I'm curious to see if there's anything else that comes up for you that you would like to share with us that perhaps we haven't talked about or touched upon.
Well, I'm going to do two things. One is, here's my little piece of advice for anyone who is kind of struggling in where you're at right now, trying to figure out what you need to do, is go try new things. Go try new things. And I think that there is a lot of power in changing our surroundings and our activities. Because what happens is when we're stuck in our own same communities, our own same neighborhoods, our own house, and we're consuming the same things over and over and over again, we find we do find it mundane, but we also find it habitual. Okay. The moment you're like, actually, I'm going to do this to myself today. I'm scared to do this. I have decided I'm going to learn how to play pickleball. Okay. Like I've just made the decision. I'm going to learn it. I need an activity in my life. And I'm going to go over to the rec center next to me and I'm just going to go in and be like, okay, what do I have to do to sign up and learn lessons? Right. That's scary for me. I'm not like a hugely physical person. And so I think when we change our activities and we change our behaviors and we try new things, we become smarter and we become more open, more growth mindset because it feels less scary, right? It's like challenging our everyday things that we're doing. And then the second thing is I did want to give something to your audience.
Oh, thank you.
So if you guys go to makeartbook.com and you click on the masterclass in there for free, if you've ever wanted or you know of someone who has ever wanted to make money from their art and try to kind of figure it out, I'm going to give you the masterclass in there for totally free. It's usually $47. If you just put in the coupon code make art, it will come up completely for free for you. So, and you can take that class. It is fun if you like art history. It's like a little smidge of art history mixed in with how we think about selling our art. So, lots of mindset shifts in there about the starving artist.
Oh, thank you so much, Karina. I'm sure that people will take you up on that. I appreciate that. I appreciate all your wisdom, everything you've shared with us, sharing space, being vulnerable, being authentic. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.